Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, November 17th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Tennessee and Donald Trump's super PAC making an announcement that they will be entering into a Donald Trump plus 21 district that's set to take place in a special election this upcoming December. In just a few weeks, 2 weeks actually, we are going to see the first results come out of the first election that we've seen since the 2025 races, in which the Democrats have done quite well in states like Virginia, New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so on and so forth. And what we are seeing here is that this is the first independent expenditure, meaning the first time that Donald Trump's super PAC, since Donald Trump was inaugurated, is now entering back into the realm of politics, clearly out of fear that if they do not invest in this race, they very well may lose it. Now, for a bit of context, if you don't know what's happening in the state of Tennessee, there is a special election happening for Tennessee's 7th congressional district, a district that in the 2024 election voted for Donald Trump statewide, by roughly the same margin as the statewide margin, by 22 points. But as it pertains to this district in specific, Mark Green, who left office early, decided that he was no longer going to serve in the United States Congress. He won 59.5% of the vote in the last election to the Democrats at 38%. This 21-point margin would put Tennessee's 7th district far out of reach in any hypothetical situation for really anyone on the Democratic Party, unless it was a special election. But in being very serious and honest about where things stand right now, it is the Republicans who have often felt that these special elections are where they are caught by surprise. And as it pertains to Tennessee's 7th district, very obviously, they don't want that to be the case. But the fact is, Donald Trump's super PAC going directly into this special election goes to show and reveals, as such, that this district is in play for the Democratic Party, and that Republicans obviously fear the Democrats going in here and ending up winning because Republicans just simply aren't paying attention. And from what we've seen over the years and what we've seen, from 2017 onward, every single election that really has taken place since Donald Trump has come into office has oftentimes resulted in races and dynamics at play that, Republicans consistently underperform in every single election besides the presidential. And so you will see that it is elections like these where Republicans often are caught lacking. And I think that Donald Trump's advisors, I don't know if this is the case, but I think a big reason as to why they are even investing in this district in particular is because they are having flashbacks, not to Tennessee, but a district in the state of Pennsylvania that in 2016 voted overwhelmingly in favor of Donald Trump. Pennsylvania's 18th congressional district, that in the special election that took place roughly 2 years after Donald Trump had been inaugurated, a district that Democrats didn't even contest because there would be no reason to do so. It was such a conservative district. Trump had won this district by an overwhelming, Republican advantage. In 2018, they took the district on the Democratic side and flipped it. They took a Donald Trump plus 20 district and won it for the Democratic Party. And thinking about, why this matters and why this made a difference is largely because the Trump administration saw this as the real first pushback against his administration when it came down to electoral margin. Yes, the elections had happened in Georgia and Kansas and Montana, and we talked about them at the time because my videos were up starting in June of 2017. But looking at the analysis then, it was largely that many of these victories for the Democratic Party were moral victories. There were no substantive and concrete flips or elections that caught the GOP too much by surprise because at the end of the day, they were still replacing their outgoing incumbents in many of these races. That was until March 13th, 2018, when Democrats saw their first major flip. And with it came all this consideration and conversation around what might it look like for the Democratic Party in 2018. And in many of these districts and many of these different states as well, we saw the same exact thing really arise, where it was the 18th district that was the first starting point for the Democratic Party, and then it came the 40 seats that Democrats gained in the 2018 midterm elections. But taking a look at Trump's super PAC coming into this, I talked to you about this, quite a bit earlier on, talking just about how there was this point of consideration from the Democrats about how they were going to even make this race competitive, right? It was such a solid Trump district, but in all of the elections we've seen this year, it actually isn't too far out of consideration that it might be competitive in 2026, and even especially in this 2025 race. It's a special election that, again, is not on many people's radar, but the ratings have reduced down from being safe for the GOP down to likely. And what we see in terms of the data from impact research and workbench strategy is that this race is within single digits. It's narrowing up, and it's getting to a point where Afton Bain, who right now serves as a state representative from this district, could very well come within reach of potentially winning this district. And it's never a good sign that the Donald Trump super PAC that is responsible for having elected him to this re-election in the first place, and it's served up to operate as this de facto Republican Party wing, is now finding itself involving itself in races that they were previously stepped back and took a sidestep because I think the Republicans felt far more comfortable with many of those races than they do right now. I think the 2025 elections were a wake-up call for Republicans across the country. They saw that for a variety of different reasons, the elections that were taking place this year weren't really favoring the GOP in a way that they were hoping it would. When they saw some of these results that they had come across in Arizona's 7th, which took a district that was already D plus 26 and made it D plus 40. Florida's 1st, which was Trump plus 33, which went down to Republicans plus 18. Florida's 6th, which went from Trump plus 30 down to Republicans plus 15, right? Tennessee's 7th is the next one on there, but you look at Virginia's 11th. That election took place in September. Democrats won it in 2024. Kamala Harris did, by roughly 36 points. In 2025, in the special election, the Democrats win it by 50. And so swinging Tennessee's 7th district by such an amount, you have to understand. The districts that already held special elections that were surprisingly far more competitive have more Republican, history and have a more entrenched Republican circumstance and partisanship in the district, that it would be the perfect combination for Tennessee's 7th district to narrowly get across that finish line for the Democratic Party. And I'm not even saying that I expect it to happen. I don't think Democrats are going to win this district, but I certainly don't think it's a good sign that, especially as Democrats are now pushing, a lot of what we are seeing here in this district, which is that this Republican, Matt Van Epps, who is hugely an establishment figure for Donald Trump and the Republicans, as MAGA as it can get, is avoiding questions surrounding what we are seeing nationwide, which is the Epstein files, this conversation around, who's going to be voting in favor of what, who's going to be in support of X, Y, and Z. I mean, these are different things that are obviously coming into consideration. But the point is that it's now impacting this Tennessee 7th district. And so I think that this sign here is that while it may not be a district that Democrats are going to win, and I certainly don't think that Donald Trump's campaign team getting involved here helps the Democrats. I think that this is not one of those circumstances where the Trump endorsement has a detriment. This is one of the circumstances where it certainly benefits. But I also do think that this is a sign of a very dire campaign, right? It didn't happen in Florida. It didn't happen when Donald Trump could have had very easy victories. And even then, there was all this hype that these races might get more competitive. Donald Trump and his campaign team never invested in any of these races. And now suddenly they're coming out of the woodwork, not to support, Winsome Sears in Virginia, not even to support Jason Miyares in Virginia's attorney general race, not to support Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey, not to support Vote No on Prop 50, not to support Andrew Cuomo, not to support the Republicans in the Georgia Public Service Commissioner races that were held statewide, not to support the Republicans on the states that were gunning to recall the justices in the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court. If that was successful, the ideological majority would have gone from Democrat to Republican. There were so many reasons and so many ways the Trump team could have invested in many of these races in 2025, but I think for many of them, they were caught by surprise, the extent at which Democrats were able to do so well, and it is this election that they are taking no chances, that they are willing to invest however amounts of money in a race that otherwise would never be on anybody's radar. Because even in 2018, in a year that was arguably quite good for the Democratic Party, rather, not the Republicans, is that many of these districts that were, swinging from being in 2016, 28 points to the right, Republicans and Democrats didn't really invest in Kansas as 2nd district. When you take a look at what the expectations were in this district, it was, expected to be quite competitive, but to the degree that ended up being from 28 points down to this completely out of left field. And also, too, not to mention, when you take a look at some of these races where maybe the Republicans could have benefited more from investments in Oklahoma's 5th. But as it comes down to the 2018 cycle, there were still some races that, in 2016, for instance, Ryan Zinke won by 15.6, but even in 2018, they couldn't crack it. Even when John Tester was winning statewide. I mean, these circumstances and these cases happen all the time where many of these districts, although they are sometimes, seen as these potential swings, just don't find themselves swinging. But I do believe that there must be some internal data that the Trump team has that makes them worried about this. Because one less seat, too, which different than 2016, I think I need to note this, is that in 2016, the Republican majority was 241 to 194. Democrats, needed those 40 seats to win back the House majority. In 2024, they need just 3. Democrats being at 215 means that if they gain 3 seats in the next election, which is undoubtedly going to happen, Democrats win back the House majority. And so if Democrats get 1 seat closer, all it takes now is that severed relationship with Marjorie Taylor Greene and one more outspoken Republican who's willing to buck the president, and then Democrats consistently can block pieces of legislation that Donald Trump needs to get through Washington, D.C. Because what we know is that on the 4th of July and in the lead up to it, the one big beautiful bill that Donald Trump tried to push through is something that his administration had to work tirelessly with multitudes of congresspeople all across this country because many of them were holding out. And all of them had the political will and capital to hold out against the president of the United States. And it forced concessions, it forced changes, it forced meetings, it forced a radical change in agenda. That the bill ended up being, something that was still very detrimental, I think, to the view of the Republican Party. It is entirely taken negatively by many members of the press, many members of constituencies, Americans nationwide. But again, getting back to this point, the reason I bring it up is to say that it took moving mountains to get that big, beautiful bill passed, as Donald Trump puts it. I don't like to use the term, but I do think that it is, that is what it is most well recognized as. And I think that the reason why this administration is investing and why Trump's team is so terrified about this district is because they see what we see. That this, of all the races, could be the sleeper. Because it is entirely out of left field. But it would also be one of those districts that what we've been seeing so far is that Democrats really are paying attention to it and Republicans are not. I do think that the Trump super PAC probably will save the Republicans in this race. I did think that from the beginning. They were always going to win this race. But I do think that this only helps. It's not one of those cases, like I said, where, involvement from the president hurts the Republican. It'll probably help in this district and will be a big reason if he is to win by 10 points instead of 5, that was made possible, right? But I do think as it stands, this district will narrow up. It will be closer than many people expect. And I do think that it will be a result that Democrats can look to and say, look what we did in a Trump plus 21 district. Look what we were able to do when all the odds were saying you can't even crack single digits in this race. If they are able to do so, that in and of itself will be newsworthy. And it will also be a test that as this administration and Donald Trump's political team looks to involve itself in races like this, is this actually waking up voters that might otherwise be apathetic, might otherwise not feel an urge or the necessary drive to vote like they did for Donald Trump 1 year ago? Does he have the ability to inspire and drive turnout in places that are so favorable to them, right? This is a solid red district, one of the more conservative ones in this country. And if Donald Trump's super PAC is not able to inspire and drive out turnout in the way that is necessary, that is a very bad warning sign, not just for what might come in this district in the future, but in every district across the country for the GOP at large. And so this super PAC getting involved, I think, is a bad sign for the Republican Party and a good sign for the Democrats. It may not end up being as advantageous, but it'll also be a great test to see exactly whether or not this benefits Donald Trump and the Republicans as much as they think it does, or does it end up backfiring? And is our understanding of it right now needing to be altered based off the election results we will see in 2 weeks' time? The real answer is that only time will tell, but I'm very interested to see exactly what happens in Tennessee's 7th District in about 15 days. And the good news is, we'll we'll probably live stream it and we'll talk about it. But as it stands right now, this is one of the closest races to watch in the country, and it seems Donald Trump is paying attention. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.